today we are getting our beans that we've been drying and popping them into something for storage, and then we're also going to be looking at some germination tests. This is part 8 of our grow along. If you haven't checked it out yet, then please do have a look, because it won't be long before we'll be sowing these seeds again. This is what the beans look like now, and they're all nice and dry. And you can tell they're dry by giving them a good sort of click together, and there is no squidge, no give within these beans at all. So next we're going to look at getting these packed away and stored in a way where they're going to be kept dry. You'll remember that we do also have these beans that are a little bit darker that we need to take into consideration. So these will be absolutely fine to eat, but we wouldn't want to use these for seeds to be growing on in case there is any pests or any issues with it. I'm going to pop these into a glass jar today, and I am going to just use a little silica gel packet as well, just to make sure that they stay completely dry. And then I have got the packet which is going to go in, just so I've got the label in there and all the information of what these are. You could also pop them into a paper envelope, so anything that's breathable will work, and keep them nice and dry. We want to make sure that they are stored in an area where there is no fluctuation to the temperature, so they're not going to sweat. When I come to sow some of these next year, I'll just be avoiding these darker ones, but in the meantime we'll be eating them. When you want to eat dried beans, what you're looking at doing is actually soaking these overnight and then cooking them the next day in fresh water. This is just going to soften them up and get them a bit easier, more palatable. It also removes some toxins from the beans as well. Pop that label in too. There we go. That's my beans all ready for sowing and growing next year, as well as eating. Seeds are wonderful things in the fact that they have everything they need within each of these seeds, whether they be tiny little seeds or bigger seeds like these, to put up their first leaves, their seed leaves, and start to germinate, as long as we can provide them with the other conditions that they need, such as the warmth, the water, and the sunlight. So today we're going to be using 10 of these dried beans that I've got. Then I've also got a piece of kitchen roll which we're going to wetten, and then we've got just a little pot with a lid, and these are going to go in the house to start to germinate. The first thing we're going to do is just start wetting our piece of kitchen roll, and this wants to be damp rather than absolutely soaking wet, so give it a little squeeze out, but don't completely squeeze it out, because it wants to hold that moisture for us. But what we also then want to do is make sure that all the moisture that is left in the pot, that we do take that out. And then we're just going to pop our cloth in here, and I'm using 10 of these seeds today because that's going to give me an easy calculation of the germination rate. And we're just going to pop them in on the damp kitchen roll. You could, if you wanted to, have pre-soaked your seeds for half an hour, but it's not something that I usually find that we need. And then we're just going to pop this damp kitchen roll over the seeds to make sure that they have plenty of contact with that bit of water. And then we're going to pop the lid on, because this is going to keep the humidity in. And then this is going to go somewhere warm and also light. Certain seeds may need darkness for germination, but the majority of seeds do require or are aided by light to help them germinate. So this is going to go in our front room under the grow lights, where it should have enough warmth. There's no heat going to go underneath it, but if in say 5 days that they haven't really done much, then I will start to add additional heat to the bottom. And then the only other thing I'll be doing is continuing to spray this piece of kitchen paper to make sure that they don't dry out. It's been 7 days since I started this germination test, and they haven't had as much oxygen as they should have had, but you can see that the majority of them have actually germinated. So we popped 10 of these yin yang beans in. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 beans that have actually germinated, and then I've got 3 that haven't, although one of them has just started germinating. This was one of the darker beans, and you can see it's not doing as well, so that's interesting to see that. But if they were given more air and I'd opened the container, then they may well have done fine. And these other ones have swollen up and they look like they're about to burst, so it's not necessarily that they're not going to germinate. This is a high enough germination rate that I'm very happy that these will be fine to be sown for next year. If I was, however, going to be pre-germinating a low germination rate batch of seeds, I would do it the same way, but rather than doing it in a little pot like this, I would space them out and then place them into a bag and leave that bag open. What this is going to do is leave enough ventilation to avoid any mold or anything happening. It was my own fault. We've had some family things going on and I haven't opened this and allowed enough oxygen to get in there, and they were a bit more crowded within the pot. And then as soon as you do see that germination starting to happen, so at this sort of stage, that's the time to pop it into the soil. You can pop it in a little bit later. You'll always find that the seeds pop the roots out first, and then as they continue to grow, the leaves will pop out as well. So that's always a really good way of germinating some seeds that either you're going to use a lot of compost for, that you don't want to waste that compost, or maybe you are questioning the germination rate of those seeds. Once we have got our seeds into our jars or into our envelopes, one of the things that we can have an issue with is pests that come out of the seeds and start causing issues with how they store. One way in which to deal with this would be to pop these into the freezer. I've always avoided popping any seeds like these into the freezer that I want to germinate. So if I was to do this, I would keep some out for the resowing. However, I am aware that plenty of people that I've heard have said that they do freeze them and then they will germinate absolutely fine the other side. But if you are going to do that and you do want to make sure they're 100% pest free, then another thing I would do is make sure that they are completely dry again after you have popped them in the freezer. So lay them back out on a tray, on some kitchen towel, and just give them another couple of days to make sure that there is no moisture left within the jar or within the envelope. Any additional moisture could cause them to germinate early or just start to rot. So we don't want to lose these seeds, whether they're for sowing or whether they are for eating now.